Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Finish More Music podcast. So, super exciting news out here in Austin, or at least it is for Anna and I. We've made some huge breakthroughs. Things have been working on for weeks here. You probably gathered by now that we like to work quickly. We like to get stuff done. And so we've had a lot of kind of blocks and challenges, being Johnny foreigners arriving out here in the US, and a lot of new things that we've never encountered before. And so even though we've made some pretty fast progress, I think it's felt like we're going slower. When I actually look back, and I often talk about this concept of measure the gain and not the gap. So measuring the gain, looking back, I think, God, actually in a short period we've achieved a lot, but there are a few things that we really wanted to get nailed that we were hitting a bunch of walls, and we're finally there. So we've taken receipt of our new car here, which is incredible. We've got our own set of wheels instead of a rental vehicle, which is always nice to have your own things that belong to you. And we've signed a contract on a house, which is mega exciting as well. Beautiful home, really excited about it. It's got this beautiful back garden, or yard is the word out here. I'm kind of getting my Americanisms together bit by bit. It's got this beautiful tree line at the back, and it feels like it's very connected to nature, which is something that's incredibly important to me. Being connected to nature is one of my kind of high values in my life. It's something that brings me a lot of energy and fulfillment and positivity. So we've got that connection. Also, it's a beautiful home that we can't wait to move into, and it's got various rooms in there that we can utilize so that we're not falling over each other when we're trying to work, which we've of course been doing in an apartment environment like this. But instead, Anna will have her own dedicated office, which she loves to shut the door and have her own space, and likewise for me. And actually it's bigger than our home that we had in the UK. We're going to be able to have a podcast room and an office, so that'd be one room, and then a room that I'll set up as my studio, so more of what I would call my creative space, where I can let my muse run riot, and then a room where I'm kind of buckling down to the more bandwidth intensive stuff. And I've really wanted that for a long time, to have that kind of separation. It's something that I've missed, and it's been years now that's been the case, but I always remember being able to kind of go out of the house and go to work in the office when I used to work in corporate, and work damn hard, and come back and then have my creative space be something different. And that actually was always a wonderful thing. And don't get me wrong, I've been super creative with my thinking creative space being the same as my workspace, but I do love that separation. I think most people who are able to find that, even if it's a corner of a room or just changing some stuff around or working on a laptop somewhere, having that separation I find to be really valuable, with that time-space oasis where you can go and play and be curious and create, and it's distraction-free. So if you are able to build that and have that in your life in any way, shape or form, I do recommend giving it a crack, because I found it to be incredibly beneficial. Now, that ties in actually really nicely with the subject of the podcast. What I thought would be a really powerful thing to do would be to collect the thoughts from members of our community around what I think is one of the most impactful questions that I ask our guests here on the Finish More Music podcast. So we've been incredibly fortunate, and it's really humbling to have had the caliber of guests that we've had on, from up and coming stars of the future, including some of our members who now, some of them are existing stars, not even up and coming anymore, through to people who are legends. Your Carl Craigs, Rodriguez Juniors, your Dub Fires, your Chris Liebings, people like this. And if you haven't checked out our back catalogue of interviews, I strongly recommend it, because one of the things that I found to be really quite wonderful about the people that we've had on the podcast is, to a person, they're very honest, open, they're very candid, they are happy to discuss their creative struggles, the walls that they hit. They don't put themselves up on some kind of pedestal, far from it. They are literally, look, this is what it is like when I'm in the trenches, this is what it's like going well. These are the holes that I've fallen down and the traps I've got snared in, and the times I thought, oh God, if only I knew this before I took that path. And this is how I've taken advantage of and crafted opportunities. Really, really powerful episodes. Now, there's one question I ask every single guest. I always have, and I always intend to. And if you're a long-term listener of the show, you're going to know what that question is. It's very simply, if you were able to jump back into time and talk to a previous version of yourself, maybe right near the beginning of your journey, and give yourself one piece of advice, that one thing that, my God, if only I knew this, what would it be? Now, that's a really powerful question, not just for people who are beginners. And if you are a beginner listening to this, and you're going to hear a bunch of these, the most impactful thing that our members have shared, not just because you're a beginner. And if you are, then you're going to hear a list of the things everyone else they wish they knew when they were where you are now. So this is going to be dynamite for you. But also, it's true if you're someone who's experienced with music and you've been at this for years, maybe you've been at this for decades potentially. Often these lessons, when we really reflect and think about them, are the things that we can get complacent about. Things that our ego might overlook until they start costing us, in which case we begin to pay attention again. And sometimes they're things that actually we are aware of, but they're framed slightly differently in the words that somebody else uses, and they become an even deeper connection for us, an even deeper lesson. And sometimes we go from a place of intellectual understanding to a place where something becomes a part of our being and our identity and who we are. And so I am always looking at these things. You know, some people think, oh, it's the basics. Well, if it is the basics, it's the base on which your entire tower, your life, your existence is built. Why wouldn't you want to keep checking that the foundations are in place and keep going back and strengthening them, right? So some of these I think are just utterly profound, no matter where you are on your journey. And I've cherry picked out of a list of well over 100 of things that I think are really impactful. So let's get stuck in with them. The first one, so a piece of advice you could give yourself, the thing you wish you knew, came from a member, Sam Morgan. And he said, and I'm going to dissect this because there's a number of great lessons in this sort of simple couple of sentences. It's okay that your music is going to be shit for a while. Not pulling any punches on this one, right? It's okay that your music is going to be shit for a while. Don't worry. Be kind to yourself. Keep going and don't take it so seriously, but do the work. So I want to dissect that a little bit because there are a number of amazing points in here to start with. It's okay that your music is going to be shit for a while. Now, let's unpack that a little bit. If we say, okay, my music's going to suck, what do we really mean by that? Well, what we mean is it's not going to meet our taste. So you're in this because you have killer taste. You've been listening to music for years. You love your music. It's inspired you enough to want to be able to make it. And so the comparison, the gap between where you are now and where you want to be is going to be pretty damn wide. And so you're going to look at that and go, my gosh, I'm not able to get anywhere near that. And we have this strange thing, I think most of us, that we maybe see something or hear something and go, gosh, I know, let's say, a lot about football. You say, I watch football all the time, or I watch tennis, or any old sport, whatever it might be. And I remember as a kid, watching Wimbledon. And it's like every summer, I think this happened. I'd then pick up, I had a tennis racket, I'd go outside and it looked easy on the telly and think, oh my God, I can play like that. Of course you can't. That notion was quickly disabused, that's for sure. It's going to take time and it's going to take work to be able to pull that off. And music is no different. Absolutely, you can hear it, you know what you like, you know what you want it to sound like. But this is about building a skill, which ties into the end of this, but do the work. So it's really important to accept that and to acknowledge that this is a part of the journey. This is the essential bit to get in there. We got to get rid of all of the rubbishy stuff that isn't meeting our expectations in order to get to the good stuff. It's kind of like digging it. You're just digging it out until you get down to the gold, right? Now, the other piece that's really powerful here is the don't worry about it. So acknowledge that this is the same and true for everyone. I think people worry it's just me. It's just me that can't do this thing. Everyone takes a bunch of time and has to finish a whole load of tracks until they get to the point where they're consistently able to write things at the level that they want. But in amongst that consistency, there is still plenty of times when the music is not going to sound that great. No one gets to go in the studio and say, today I'm going to write a banger. Well, you can say it, but you can't guarantee it, ever. Now that ties into the next bit. Be kind to yourself and keep going. Okay? Don't take it too seriously. It's not life and death. I think one of the worst things we can ever do is bully ourselves about things not going right that were never ever going to go right in the first place. To have these ludicrous expectations of ourselves and then to give ourselves a hard time when we don't meet them. To expect that one day every track we write will be amazing. That day will never ever come. And fortunately, by the time you get there, you will have figured that stuff out for sure from experience and not just from listening to other people telling you it. But if you were just to take that leap of faith and trust all of us who tell you that it is going to suck for a while, the music you write, but it's okay. Be kind to yourself and know that you are treading the path that everyone has trod before you to get to that level that you want to get at. You are doing the work, and that's the key. You got to do the work. It's no good messing around playing with loops, playing with plugins, watching tutorials. That is not the work. The reason you're doing that is because it's easy. The work means getting in the trenches. And sometimes it's gonna be hard and frustrating and difficult. And often creative breakthroughs are superseded by real levels of frustration and angst and difficulty. It's the journey that you're choosing, but it's great because it's like a roller coaster. It's filled with the tension and the frustration and the difficulty of like just hanging there maybe, and then the exhilaration of when it all goes off and it works. And then, maybe it's a bit slow again, or it's turning you in ways that are making you feel a bit sick, and then boom, there's another exciting part. Isn't that more exciting than leading a vanilla life? I think so. Your shout. So I'm going to read the whole thing again. It's okay that your music's going to be shit for a while, but don't worry. Be kind to yourself, keep going, and don't take it too seriously, but do the work. Now, if you got that off of one of those quote websites, you'd be like, wow, I'm going to have this right. And these are all things that our members have said. They're super smart people, and they're able to articulate these problems often so much better than we are ourselves when we're experiencing them. So the next one, Dan Ruffle, real legend in the community, Dan, love him to pieces. And he said, don't spend ludicrous amounts of time and money on third-party plugins and soft synths. It's only taken me 18 months to realise Operator is utterly amazing. So if Dan could go back in time, he'd basically say to himself, stop spending all of this money on stuff. What you've got is more than enough. Now, I've told this story a bunch of times, so I'll keep this short and sweet, but I literally spent 10 grand. I was given it as an inheritance from my grandparents. My dad, bless him, had passed away, so it was his inheritance. And it actually got split between my brother and I. And I ended up with roughly £10,000 burning a hole in my pocket as a young man. And I was like, oh, I'm going to buy a studio. I was a DJ, always wanted to have a crack at writing music. Went to a shop back then called Digital Village, and the salesman there was only too happy to spend a lot of it for me on a whole bunch of completely overwhelming gear that I had no guidance on how to use. And actually it crippled my development for a couple of years, I would say. I probably burned a few years away, and Dan's put like 18 months to realise Operator is utterly amazing. That's a synth that comes with Ableton Live, in case you're not familiar with it. Yeah, and it created so much frustration and difficulty for me. And I would have progressed way faster with a quarter of that gear. Really, really simply. Now, back then, it was hardware. There wasn't really much in the way of software, kind of synths and samplers and things like that. In fact, the I got a sampler for about $2,500. They kitted it out with all of this amazing stuff. And 6 months later, Steinberg, who make Cubase, released Hallion, which was the first soft sampler, the first software sampler, right? And my piece of kit became obsolete pretty much overnight, to be fair. It was this clunky ass thing compared to what you could do in a computer. But point being here is you have enough now. And all that's going to happen if you keep spending your money is, number one, you're going to lose an absolute shed load of money, a shed load that you could be doing other great things with, whether it's spending it on your family or other things that are legitimately going to fulfill you in your life, or invest in and having the money work for you in your future. And number two, you're going to end up really, really overwhelmed and struggling. The gear will not be the solution for you in any way, shape, or form. How you show up, and we'll get to this a little bit later, is what is going to make the difference. Doing the work is going to make the difference. The secret is not going to be in tons and tons of gear. In fact, that is what's going to slow you down and make this feel like you are crawling through quicksand. And if I look back to the beginning and I said, whether you're a beginner or whether you're experienced, sometimes these things are going to be that slap in the face. Right now, you might be the person who's sitting there looking at one of these Mega Deal 2000 that happen every other week on, the websites, about to buy another load of stuff. And when you look at it, you'll be like, actually, listening to this, I don't need any of this gear. This is shiny object syndrome. Let's get back and do the work. I've got tools that do what this stuff does already. So, number two, just be mindful of what you're bringing into your studio and what you're spending your money on. Now, Thomas O'Shea, this is a really, really powerful one. Keep it as simple as possible. I try too hard to get too many sounds going, then I realize that some of the best bands in the world make amazing music with just 4 basic elements. This is so true. I think, particularly when we start out, we have this belief that complexity equals quality. And actually, when you analyze music, and this is one of the things I, really have spent a lot of time doing inside of the FMM community, is teaching members how to accurately analyze and understand music, to understand what's happening in it. When you are able to break it down, talking exclusively now about electronic music, but pretty much most styles, when you break it down, you find out it's far more simplistic in nature than you imagine. And actually, too much complexity means we're often burying what's the good parts of what is there. You just keep throwing more and more and more stuff at it, and actually you obscure the thing about the piece of music that is so impactful. And when you understand all about contrast and juxtaposition and development in music, and when you're able to analyze music, you realize that actually many, or the majority, in fact, of the best tracks are actually pretty simple in their nature. It's just that the person who's written it has found ways to keep it interesting, entertaining, for the different elements to interact with each other in really musical, often exciting ways, how to build tension and release and all of these things without chucking 5 tons of stuff at it, obscuring the idea and making the mix down an absolute mission. So if you find yourself thinking, I need to have more because complexity equals quality, I'd invite you to reverse that. It tends to be the more simplistic music where we can clearly hear the core idea that is the music that stands out and is the most memorable to us. Okay, next one. 2 here that are really intertwined, but I'm going to read them both because I think they complement each other really, really well. So Dan Cousins said, a key importance in his life, not just in music production, is to be really mindful of the people you surround yourself with. Be mindful of the people you surround yourself with. And Samuel Dick said, surround yourself with people who hold your same passion and put the time in every day. And I think that's really something important at the end there. If you surround yourself with people who are committed and dedicated and people who are acting in a way that you want to act in, That's going to rub off on you, and that is going to influence you. Environment is absolutely huge. It plays a huge part. It puts a huge amount of influence on the way that we show up every day. And you will probably have experienced this. Maybe you have mates who are a distraction to you, let's say. Perhaps you've tried to be shooting for something in your life. Maybe you can relate it to music, and they keep cropping up like saying, oh, let's go and do this, let's do that, because they don't share the same goals as you. And you end up getting kind of dragged along. We've all had time vampires in our life. Maybe you've got one now. Someone who somehow seems to just keep turning up and using up your time, and you keep looking back at it thinking, what a chronic waste of time that was. Maybe you got wasted in the pub or down the club and you burned through your weekend, or maybe you just ended up sitting there with not much to do, but they just wanted some company and they were using your time for it. So we know what it's like, right? If you want to fly with the eagles, don't hang with the crows. It might sound harsh, but you only get one shot at life. So be very careful about who you share it with. So the last episode we did, I think it was the last one, episode 181, or maybe it was two episodes ago, I think. 181 was called Complementary Strengths, and that was all about finding people who complement you. So this idea of having people around you who are absolutely amazing at motivating you, inspiring you, holding you accountable, and who you contribute the same to. A group of people you can be a part of something with, a family, people who've got your back and you've got theirs, people who can hear what you can't hear, see what you can't see, people who operate from a place of hope and optimism and not hopelessness and pessimism. Imagine what that's like to have that kind of collective around you versus people who are negative, who drag you down, who speak badly about others all the time. When you're in that environment, it makes it easy to give in to fear, to not be seen, and to not lead your best creative life. So I think Dan and Sam are absolutely on point with that. Be mindful of the people you surround yourself with. Make sure they've got the same level of ambition and drive that you do, maybe even more, and make sure that you contribute to them so you've got an energy exchange. Operate from a place of how can I help and not what's in it for me. Okay, two more. Last two. Andy Rayside. This one I absolutely love. Don't get bogged down in the bigger picture for too long. I have worried about quality over quantity, big labels and big DJs playing my music. And effectively what Andy's talking about is getting stuck inside your own head and being fueled by what we call extrinsic motivators. Fame, fortune, money, respect, like people loving you, idolizing you, all of that stuff. Now, it's not to say that we don't think about those things if they are key drivers for you, for your long-term goal. Absolutely, there's a time and a place to use those for motivation, to maybe jump out of bed in the morning. But when it comes to creativity, if we are consistently drawing on the outcome of what we are doing, number one, if you're not there yet, then you're immediately measuring the gap of how far you've got to go. So straight away, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm nowhere near where I want to be. Number two, you're likely to be glancing sideways at other people instead of looking in the mirror. That's to say, rather than saying, my gosh, look at the difference between me now and where I was last month. You're instead looking at the big DJs and the people on the big labels and feeling potentially inferior to them. And one of the worst things about it is when we focus on the outcome, I've got to get this quality and this quality all of the time. Well, that's a fickle kind of master, because what happens there is sometimes you write good music and sometimes you don't. And that's the way of it. We never know. Looping back to the beginning of the episode, we never know what we're going to get when it comes to creativity. And if you are valuing your self-worth and your self-respect on these external references that fluctuate, then one day you're going to think you're a hero, and the next, when you haven't written good music, you're going to think you're a piece of trash. And that's not a nice way to treat ourselves, right? This idea of kindness and compassion, external referencing, anyone who does that, and people do this all the time. You see, people get in a really depressed and dreadful state when they've perhaps attached their self-worth to maybe their job or their income, and whether it's a mistake they made or something that is just external environment through no fault of their own, they lose all of their identity and sense of self-worth and self-respect. Now, the flip side of that is to write the music for the reason that you love writing the music. The thing that lights you up about it, whether it's the learning, whether it's the opportunity to contribute music to the world, to connect with other people, whether it's just the exploration of sound and what you're doing, your personal development, because music really shines a light on a lot of our fears and struggles and helps us to develop and bring awareness to those things and resolve them. Whatever it is, if it's intrinsic to you, then it's always there. Whether the track is good or not good, whether it got signed or didn't get signed, whether you got the gig or you didn't get the gig, the actual core reason why you love doing it, why it's fulfilling you, will still always be there. And that is a really beautiful, stable base. So yes, your emotions might fluctuate depending on the quality of the outcome or what happened. You're a human being, and that's a good thing. We want to feel the full range of emotions, but your sense of self-worth will not be dented. Your self-value will not be dented. And the thing that sustains you and keeps you going will consistently be there. So what Andy kind of nailed there is just, so impactful when we really unpack it and look at all the pieces of that put together. So one last one, and I've saved one of, I think, the very best till last. And this is like a short, really punchy. I'm just looking at it now. It's 8 words, okay? It's 8 words. So this is from our man Jonas Klugel. Now, at episode 174, Jonas did a case study. I strongly recommend listening to it. A young man who's incredibly passionate and dedicated to his music, struggled for many, many years to get anywhere, felt like giving up. And thank God he didn't, because he's a fantastic DJ, smashing out great tunes now. And one of the things that he shared around this question of, something he wish he knew, was quite simply this: the answer is not in a new synth. The answer is not in a new synth. Now, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into this and explain why I think this is so powerful. It's because the answer is never external to us. It's always inside of us. The answer's not external to us, it's inside of us. And this loops back to what I was talking about with Dan's quote about the gear, okay? This idea that if you keep accumulating things, or you wait until there's a certain circumstance, in order to get the result that you want, you're going to be waiting for a very long time, if not forever. Because it isn't the things that we have that get us results. Happiness is not contained in what we have. Happiness is contained in who we become. There is a reason why there are incredible producers like Recondite, for example, out there, Roberto, Buana, who's now produces under his new moniker, his actual name, Nathan McKay. Sebastien Leger springs to mind. For a long time was just using Ableton. There are incredible artists out there using the most basic of setups. Why? Because it's who they are that dictates the quality of the music they write, and not the things that they have. If you take someone who can't write music and put them in £1 million studio, you're not going to get a good track. But take someone who can and give them a basic setup, you'll get something amazing. Who you become is eternal. Okay, it's the forever version of you. It's the forever of your existence. What you have and what you get and the outcome that you achieve is fleeting. It's momentary. These things are never going to be the answer to happiness and satisfaction and fulfillment. Who you become is the key to that. So the answer is not in a new synth. The answer is in who you are, your way of operating, your habits, behaviors, the way that you view the world, your beliefs and your way of thinking. So rather than kind of going out searching for things externally, if instead you work on yourself, who writes the best music? The best music producers, right? So work on becoming that person as opposed to always getting distracted with all of these external goodies that are out there and when this happens, then I'll do the work. We get back to that idea of doing the work now, right? So I think they were incredible kind of statements and perspectives and, you know, things born from incredible struggles and experience and wins and opportunities from our community. So a big thank you to the guys who I've featured in this, but everyone who's answered that question whenever I've posed it. And I hope that wherever you are on your journey, one or hopefully more of these things really resonated with you. I think if we all managed to live from these places consistently, we would all be leading better, more creative lives as a result of it. So well worth holding on to those things as you move forward. Do you have anything? In fact, let me actually rephrase that totally. Hit me up with a DM at I am Keith Mills. What is the one thing you wished you knew when you started? Even if you started quite recently, you went, God, if I'd have known that, it would have saved me a bunch of time. It would have made the journey easier, less frustrating, lighter, whatever it might be. Hit me up and let me know, because I love sharing things like this on the podcast, and we can cycle back around with some other fresh insights. So show notes, as always, finishmoremusic.com/183. I do hope that you've enjoyed the show. Do take care. Until next time, happy music making.